While skulls weren't introduced in Halo 3, Halo 3 was the game where they became toggleable from a menu, whereas the Halo 2 skulls needed to be found each time you booted up the Xbox if you wanted to use them. Halo 3 features two types of skulls. The campaign skulls we're familiar with up to this point, and skulls on certain multiplayer maps. We'll talk about those later. For now, let's get to the hunt. Campaign skulls will only appear on normal difficulty or higher. Each level has at least one skull, and you have to start the level from the beginning in order for it to spawn. Note, finding these skulls isn't necessary in MCC as all the skulls are available from the start, but the skulls do have achievements tied to them, which is fun. First up is the Blind Skull on Sierra 117, which can be found near the start of the level when you have your first fight. You come to this small creek which leads into a pool. Go down to the pool, turn to the right, walk to this rock face. Turn to the left and you'll see an outcropping with the skull. The second skull, Iron, is found at the end of the level at the dam where you rescue Sergeant Johnson. When you come to this bridge, jump up to this block on the right and onto the balcony here. Walk along the balcony to the end. Hidden away in this corner, you'll find the skull. The next skull, Black Eye, can be found at the start of the level Crow's Nest. After the cutscene, come to the back of the room where you find these racks. Jump onto the racks, then onto this beam, and finally onto this pipe above the room. At the very end of the pipe is the Black Eye skull.
We knew they'd find us eventually, but we have a plan. Let's make it happen.
The fourth skull, Grunt Birthday Party, can be found later in the level. You'll come to this hall after dropping down a shaft with drones flying between the pipes. At the end of the hall, turn around and slowly back into the hole where you'd normally drop down and try to land on this ledge with a green arrow. At the end of this passage is the skull. Alternatively, if you grab a gravity lift earlier in the level, you can drop into the hole and use the gravity lift to get into the passage with the skull. The Tough Luck Skull can be found on Savo Highway just after you get past the first brute blockade. You'll know you're in the right section as you see a CCS-class battlecruiser flying overhead, and you hear a message from Oni Recon 111. After exiting the tunnel, you'll see a large pipe to your left. Jump over to it and climb up and over this ladder. You'll know you're in the right area if you find a health regen at the top. Drop down to this concrete beam, walk to the end, turn left, and you'll see the skull on a rock outcropping. The Catch Skull can be found on the level The Storm, in this open area where you find an AA Wraith and a regular Wraith. It's important to note that you must not destroy the regular Wraith or the skull will despawn. You can, however, safely take out the Wraith's gunner, along with the AA Wraith and any other enemies in the area. When you're ready, come down here and grab this Troop Hog. Being mindful of the Wraith, come to the left side of this silo where you can see there's a bit of a dirt hump. Back the Warthog onto this hump, then use the Warthog to jump on top of the silo. Note that you may need to crouch jump to get up there. If you aren't aware, a crouch jump is when you hold the crouch button during a jump. This lifts the player's legs just a bit so they can get to places they normally couldn't reach. At the top of the silo, though, is your skull. The Fog Skull can be found on the level Floodgate near the start of the level. When the level loads, you'll be directed to head back down the hill you would have come up in the previous level. When you enter the industrial area, look to the roof of this building on the right. Eventually you'll see a Flood combat form up there. When the combat form jumps, shoot it until you see it drop something. This is the skull. If you shoot too early or too late, the skull may be dropped in a place you can't reach, in which case simply load the previous checkpoint. The Ark has two skulls, the first being Famine. The Famine Skull can be found on this archway not too long into the level. You can grab this before or after you get the Scorpion for the first time. Come to these rocks here, jump onto them, and then jump over to the Forerunner structure. Walk to the end of the structure and the skull is found at this final arch. Grenade jump from the ledge to the arch to claim your skull. The Cowbell Skull is found later on in the level, not long after you destroy the Scarab. First thing you'll want to do is, after destroying the Scarab, go into this central structure and grab a gravity lift. After the room with a ton of explosive Covenant batteries, you'll come to this hall with a slanted floor and a series of openings. At the very top is the skull. Place the gravity lift near the bottom of the slope, just off center, and jump up to the top hole. You'll get a checkpoint in this area so you can revert to it if you mess up. I did several times. The level The Covenant again has two skulls, the first being Thunderstorm. This can be found right after you get the Hornet in the same area you'd find Terminal 5. You'll grab the Hornet and fly to the second tower, the one the elites just deactivated. Be sure not to fly too far or an invisible barrier will spawn preventing you from going back. Go to the deactivated tower and at the top of this outcropping structure, at the very end, is the skull. You can find the I Would Have Been Your Daddy skull at the end of the level. After the cutscene with Truth's death, you'll be told to fight back across the bridge you just came across against the Flood. It's not a bad idea to clear out the area of enemies to make this easier. Once done, you'll need to hop through the holographic halo rings in a particular order to make the skulls spawn. The ring nearest the elevator is 1, and the ring by the light bridge is 7. Jump through the rings in the following order: 4, 6, 5, 4, 5, 3, 4. If you mess up, you can simply start the sequence over from the beginning again, no problem, no need to reload or anything. When you finish, the halos will light up, and you'll be able to claim the skull at the light bridge. The Tilt Skull can be found on the level Cortana. You'll come to this large circular room after falling through a hole in the ceiling. Clear the room of enemies to make the next part easier. Come to this pillar on the left, jump to the very top, then look just to the left and jump onto this flood outcropping. Jump again to get to the top of the outcropping. Turn around and jump to yet another outcropping. Crouch jumping can help you with this. Jump then to a flood tentacle, walk over to the top of this Covenant structure, and you'll find your skull. The 13th and final campaign skull, Mythic, can be found at the start of the level Halo. When you load this level up, head to the cave that would normally take you to the first combat section. When you enter the cave, hug the right wall until you see a path leading in a different direction. This should be found not too far into the cave. At the end of this path is the skull. And that covers the 13 campaign skulls. Finding each skull will get an individual Skull Taker achievement, and finding all 13 will get you the Witch Doctor achievement, an achievement with a rather fun name. However, those aren't the only skulls in Halo 3. The last 6 maps released for Halo 3, collectively called the Mythic Maps, each contain a hidden skull that players could find. Like with classic Halo 3, these had achievements tied to them. These skulls can only be found in Forge. To find the skull on assembly, come to the edge of the map and look up. You should see to your right this blue energy field, and to your left an orange one. Now look at the center of the map. The skull is atop this cable coming out from the center. On Orbital, come to the large pit in the center of the map. In monitor mode, fly to the top of the map and you'll see the skull tucked away on a ledge. The Sandbox Skull is probably the most challenging to get, as it's at the edge of the map where Guardian Towers will kill you if you're out in the open. To get it, first, spawn a landmine. In monitor mode, grab the landmine and open the item properties. Set the spawn rate to 10, then open the summary and set runtime minimum to 1. This will cause them to spawn quickly. Go into player mode, stand over where the landmine spawns, then start placing them. Do not move when you're doing this or it could cause them all to explode. Place the landmines until geometry on the map starts to despawn. This means that you've overloaded the map and the Guardian Towers will no longer fire. Fly just to the right of the tower, to the right of the sunset in the distance. The skull normally spawns in this small crevice here, though it may not be present since we overloaded the map. Build a structure around where the skull spawns and place a teleporter inside the structure. Set the teleporter's channel to 1. Fly back to the map's main area, spawn another 2-way teleporter, and set the channel to 1 as well. Start a new round to reload the map, then use the teleporter to get to the skull. There are other methods to get the skull, but this is the one I found easiest. Next, we have the skull on Citadel. From the center of the map, go to the lower section on the blue side by the overshield. Red side has more of an orange hue, while blue is more blue. From the overshield, look to the left to see these triangular structures on the wall. In the rafters above them is the skull. Spawn an active gravity lift from the scenery page to get the skull out of the rafters. If you mess this up, such as moving the skull to an unreachable area, simply start a new round and try again. The Heretic skull is much easier to find by comparison. From the top of the level on the side with the windows, look to the base on the left. The skull is under vents just above the base. There's nothing to stand on, so what you'll want to do is hover above the skull, enter player mode, then hold the action button as you fall to pick it up. Finally, we have the Longshore skull. This skull can be found on these vents to the right of the Frank's fish sign. And that concludes the multiplayer skulls. Each one gets you an individual achievement, with collecting all 6 getting you the Brain Pan achievement. That's all for this guide. Thank you for watching, and until next time, this has been Halo Canon. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing, liking, and leaving a comment. These all greatly help out the channel. If you want more things to hunt in Halo 3, I also have a guide for Halo 3's terminals available, which includes a dive into their lore. Consider checking that out as well.